Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Also, please do check out the description section below where I often put more information about the things I am talking about. There might also be links down there as well. And if I have a change of mind, a change of heart, or potentially there's something that I forgot to mention and I thought about it after I made the video, it'll be in that description. If you happen to own an amp that you really like or an amp that you possibly really hate, please post that in the comment section below. I would love to hear about it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a little overview, a little comparison, a little shootout, so to speak, of these amplifiers that you see over here. Each of these amplifiers does have its own separate review, so please do check out the individual review for each amp because there's a lot more information than I'm going to cover in this. So this is kind of just going to touch on some of like the main points. The first amp over here, and I guess for its price, is pretty popular. This is the Crown XLS Drive Core 1002. This amplifier is 215 watts into 8 ohms. Now this amplifier, in my opinion, is really only good for potentially if maybe you have a lot of parties where you want to plug this into like your outdoor patio, your garage, you want to be a DJ, or maybe, you have parties and, that's what you like to do. You like to DJ and you have a pair of speakers that are a DJ speaker, okay? On the box, it shows somebody doing just that. So again, check out the video that I have of this. The next amp over here is the Parasound. This is the New Classic 2125 V.2. This is a 2-channel amp. This amp is THX Ultra 2 certified. So this amp is 150 watts into 8 ohms. This amp, the NAD C388, is also 150 watts into 8 ohms. So just, kind of keep that in mind. These are the only 2 amps here that are the same wattage. The Parasound I find to be a very warm sounding amp. And it's also very pulled back sounding in the mid-range and also in the treble, where it's not a forward sounding amp. And as a matter of fact, it sounds very similar to the Emotiva, but not in tonal quality. As far as in, I guess, sound stage and the way this is also kind of pulled back. And what I mean by it's pulled back is that it's not forward sounding, whereas like the vocals and the snare drums are very forward sounding, like with the Marantz over here. And this is the Marantz MM7055, which is 140 watts per channel. Okay, so the Marantz is more forward sounding with its drums, with its vocals. So back to the Parasound. The Parasound, again, has 150 watts into 8 ohms. I think that this amp is an amp that would be a great match for something like the Bowers & Wilkins Anniversary Edition, the 600 series, or the 603s that I have a video for, so check that out. The reason for that is this amp is warmer sounding, so it's even warmer sounding than the Marantz MM7055 at 140 watts per channel into 8 ohms. It definitely calms down the treble region and, the things that would make a speaker sound bright. So a speaker like the Bowers & Wilkins, I think, might be an excellent match for this. I also think that a speaker like the PSB, what was it, the Imagine X2T or whatever. Anyway, I have a video for that tower. I think that this amp would be a good match for it because it would help to take that tweeter and kind of calm it down so it's not as bright, it's not as sharp sounding. Possibly Focal Coras, I think that this might be a good match for that as well, especially for anybody that finds them to be a little bit bright as well. So if you're finding it to be a little bit bright, a little bit sharp, I think that the Parasound New Classic model 2125, it might be a great choice. I would like to hear the Parasound, I think it's a model 2150 or 2250 or something, I forget, but it has 270 watts into 8 ohms times 2. And I'm wondering if the sound quality of that is different, because many times, even though two amplifiers look the same and the only overall difference is the wattage, sometimes that wattage really makes a difference, or maybe the internal components are also a little bit different and it changes the sound quality. So I just think that it would be interesting to hear, and I think that if you're looking for an amp that's on the warm side but something that's more powerful, that might be a great choice to check out. And I think that the aquarium light is beaming off my head. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so back to this amp. Some other reasons for purchasing this amp would be the various features. I'm not going to go over all the features in this video, but you can use this in a few different ways. I like the fact that it can power two different sets of speakers. So you could play set A, you could play set B, and you could play them at the same time. I played them at the same time and I thought that it really sounded great. Like I didn't hear any like weakness when I added the second set. Some of the other things about this that's really nice is the fact that it has this input over here, and this input can actually sense the output volume from whatever it is you're listening to. And it also has the 12-volt trigger, which is, you know, pretty standard with amps. And it has a nice filter over here if you want to filter out some of the frequencies. I feel like this particular amp pretty strong in the bass region. It is a class AB amp, and I feel like it kind of digs deep. Kind of when I compared it to the other amps, you know, even though there might be a difference in the wattage, I feel like this amp, and again, if this amp was the model up at 270 watts a channel, it might have some really nice low end to it. So just, you know, keep that in mind for the future. I'm gonna move down here. Actually, I do want to point out that Parasound with the definitive 7006 or the definitive bipolar 9060s that I also have, I think it's just a little, it's just a little too warm sounding for those speakers. It's not bad sounding by any means, but I would like a little bit more in the mid-range and maybe a little bit more in that treble region. So I guess what I'm saying is that maybe that upper mid-range into the treble region, a little bit more from the vocals, a little bit more from the snare drum, like with the Polk Audio monitor, which I don't have over here. I moved it over there now, but you can check out another video where I have it. The Polk Audio Monitor 2 Series, the 40 bookshelf, it sounds the best it's ever sounded with this amp. So just, you know, keep that in mind. And if you own the Polk Audio Monitor Series, this amp, I think, could be an excellent choice because it helps to calm down some of the forwardness and some of the brightness of that speaker. So now I'm going to go over to the Marantz, and this is the what was it, the 7055? 7055, yeah. I can't keep track of all these numbers, these numbers and names. Anyway, this amp is 140 watts times 5, okay? They make this in a 2-channel amp, which is the MM7025, I believe, or no, or was it 70? I think it's 7025. I could be wrong. Anyway, the 2-channel amp is 140 watts times 2, whereas this one's 140 watts times 5. This amp, if you only use this for like 1 speaker or 2 speakers, so it's not going to be louder, and it's not going to put out more power into 2 speakers like some of the other amps do. And that's something that the Emotiva does, okay? I contacted the company, and Marantz told me that's not the case at all with this. It's 140 watts. So if you only hook up 1 speaker, again to this, if you hook up 1 speaker, you're getting 140 watts. Now, something I do want to point out is the binding posts on this. I mean, I think that they could have done better. They're a little chintzy feeling. I do have a separate video for it, so check it out. It's a pretty long video, so, you know, I suggest watching it. Everything, pretty much almost everything here on the back is the same as on the Emotiva. This amp, it doesn't have any type of a switch like the way the NAD or the Parasound has, where you could go back and forth between set A, set B. So with this amp, the same with the Emotiva, it's totally controlled by whatever you're listening to. So if you're listening to a home theater receiver, let's say the front left, the front right, the center channel, and 2 surrounds are hooked up, and you're only running it in 2 channels, well, it's going to play 2 channels. If you're running it in 3, or if you're running it in 5, it's only going to play that. And again, that's the same with the Emotiva, so I don't have to explain it again when I get over here. This amp sounds like Marantz, okay? It sounds like Marantz. It sounds like the SR7013 receiver that I have, and you know, I love that receiver. I think it's fantastic. It sounds just like it. So when I hooked it up, it was, I mean, the sound quality was pretty much the same. Maybe this one was a tinge, just a tiny smidgen, little speck clearer sounding. But it's also 140 watts versus that receiver's 125, so it could be the extra 15 watts added to the speakers, making it sound just, you know, a little bit better. I think that this amp, I think it's a good match for speakers like the Aeon 3. I enjoyed it. And I actually, you know, I should back up. The Parasound was also pretty good with the Aeon 3, but it kind of pulled it back even more, and that's not a forward sounding speaker, it's a wide sounding speaker. But the Marantz, it's more forward sounding. It's a little bit, it's stronger with the cymbals. It's a little stronger with the vocals, a little bit stronger with the snare drums. So, you know, it kind of changes the sound, whereas, you know, something like the Emotiva is more pulled back in that region. I think that with this particular amp, you know, you might want to choose it for speakers that could be a little bit brighter. I mean, if you really have to calm down a speaker, you want to go with the Parasound, I think. Like if you're really just like, oh, like, you know, I can't take the sharpness of the speaker, I can't take it, whatever. You know, you want to go with the Parasound. This Marantz might also be a good buy to, again, add on to a receiver that is Marantz. It also blended well with Onkyo. Now it is 140 watts, so it's not as strong as, for example, you know, the Emotiva. The NAD C388, you can see that this one has a volume knob, it has a front display. So this is basically a integrated amplifier. I added the HDMI add-on to it, which I guess then would be, I guess, kind of like a receiver then, I guess, because it has the HDMI. But I don't think that this particular unit, I don't think that it's a very good buy because of the Bluetooth that you're paying for that's included in this, okay? And then you have to start adding on the cards. The antenna, which is right over here, there's this little antenna. It's only for Bluetooth streaming. So you're streaming from your tablet or your phone over to this, whatever has Bluetooth, I guess. And that's really all you could do with it. If this antenna was for Wi-Fi and you could Wi-Fi stream, then I would kind of say, you know, maybe this is a good buy. They do have an amp that I believe the specifications are almost the same as this. It's 150 watts into 8 ohms. This amp is a Class D amp, okay? And actually I should mention that Marantz is a Class AB. You know, this is a Class D, or at least from what I understand, it's a Class AB, so if something's changed, you know, let me know. But this is a Class D amp, so Class D amps run very cool, and they're also very power efficient. It does run very cool, but I would consider purchasing the amp version instead of this, because again, I just think that the Bluetooth part of it is, it's just not worth it. And you know, that's included in the cost. Sound quality of this is kind of interesting because with the NAD, there was some things that I thought sounded great. Like I thought that the definitive bipolar towers, the 7006, which are an old speaker, I never heard it sound as good as with the NAD. And maybe the Emotiva as well, okay? The sound actually, it might be kind of close. I thought that the sound stage on this was was excellent, and it really made the Definitive Technology towers come to life. I just thought that they were nice and clear, and the overall imaging when I was listening to music and how the sounds were going back and forth between the speakers, it changed the sound so much that I have a very different opinion of these speakers now, and I wish I could go back in time, because even like with this amp, the Emotiva with these, I think the Emotiva sounds great with them as well. And you know, I've had these things for like 15 years or maybe more. I don't even know how long I've had these things, but I've had these things for so long that I was at a point where I feel like these speakers were at the end of the lifespan. Like it's time for new speakers. And now when I listen to them through these, I'm like, why would I buy new speakers? Because they just sound great. The speaker just needed 150 watts or more and of tonal quality that these deliver, okay? Because this is 150 watts, okay? And it just, like I said, it's a little too warm for them, and then this is 140 watts, and I think that they sound good. They sound good, but not as good as with these hooked up. So check out the review I have for the NAD C388 amplifier as well. There were some speakers that I really didn't care for with it, like the Polk Monitor 240s, the bookshelf. I was kind of like, but you know, I don't really care for those speakers overall. So you know, I think it takes a certain like special kind of amp to make it sound good, and that amp has to be very, very warm sounding. This amp, I can't really wrap my head around it as to whether I feel like it's warm or it's neutral. I keep going back and forth. If you happen to own an amp that's similar to this, if so, please post it in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion about the tonal quality of the NAD. And the next one to get into is the Emotiva XPA. This is the Gen 3 version. This amp, if it's run in 2-channel mode, puts out 300 watts a channel. If it's running 3-channel, it's 275 watts. And then if it's running 5 channels, it's 250 watts a channel, so just keep that in mind. To my ears, I think it's neutral or neutral to cool side. It's definitely not warm. It's definitely not warm. So it's somewhere around that neutral, but maybe if this is neutral, we're somewhere here, or maybe we're a little bit over here to the coolish side. It's not a forward sounding amp, because I do find it kind of the opposite of the Parasound, whereas the Emotiva is very clear. The NAD I found to be very clear with the Definitive Towers. The Emotiva is pretty close to that, but I am going to back up because I should have mentioned that I feel like the NAD, it doesn't really get down in the bass as deep as like the Parasound does, okay? It's good, but you know, it is a Class D, but it just doesn't dig as deep, okay? When I listen to this, and I was comparing them, I can hear that the Parasound was just putting out, it just sounded a little bit deeper, a little bit stronger in the bass. If you don't have anything to compare it to, then you might say it's perfectly fine, okay? And that's, you know, that's the case with most pieces of home theater equipment. If you don't have anything to compare it to, and you're happy with what you hear, then you think it's great and you think it's fine. And you know, I've been doing that for years until I listened to something else, and now I've reached the point where I've learned that, for example, if I'm going to purchase an amp or I'm going to purchase a speaker, I should probably at the very least pick up at least 2 or 3 different brands that are around the same specs. So if I'm looking for like 150 watts, I should have at least 2 or 3 that are around, you know, the 150 watt range in order to compare it to the Emotiva. Now, again, I think it's kind of neutral or neutral cool. It's a very clear sounding amp. I don't feel like I'm struggling to hear instruments. I always find that mid-range, that snare drum range for me, I think for years has always been a big issue, okay? This Emotiva does really well, okay? And I found that all of the speakers that I hooked up to it, which is pretty much all the speakers that I mentioned, except for the Polk monitor, I didn't hook up the Polk to this. You know, I hooked it up to everything else, and you know, I like the sound of it overall. Overall, I think it's nice and clear. I'm a little uncertain if it's normal for a amp that has 300 watts, if it should sound like it has more bass, if it should dig a little deeper. This amp is a Class AB, and somehow it switches over to Class H or something like that. It's able to switch back and forth, but you know, I'm just wondering if it should sound a little bit stronger in the bass, because I don't really feel like when I'm listening to this versus this or this, that I'm getting more bass out of it, okay? It just, to my ears, it sounds pretty close, and I would think because when you're going from 150 watts to 300, it should be stronger. I don't know if this has, the strongest bass, or if it's just, the overall sound quality of the Emotiva, and that's just its, sound blend. Whereas, this one was a little bit, I felt like it's a little bit heavier in that region. And then when I say this one, the Parasound, especially at the price of this, which I think it's about 1,800 or 1,800 or something like that. I think that this, overall, I think that it's a really good buy. The difference between the Emotiva and the Marantz MM7055 is, the Marantz is more forward sounding and it's a little bit warmer sounding. But, again, these two amps function the same. They both have pretty much the same inputs. It has the XLRs, it has the RCA, connectors on it. So, I think that anything that you choose, of course, is up to you. It has to blend well with your equipment, whether it's a preamp or a home theater receiver that you're, hooking it up to. It has to blend well with your room acoustics and, your hearing. You just have to appreciate it. So, again, it doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what hundreds of other people say. It has to be right to you. It has to appeal to you overall. If you purchase something and you don't like the sound, don't keep it because hundreds of other people say it's great. If you have used any of these amps or any of these brands, and there's another brand that I haven't listened to and I don't have here, please tell me about it. I would love to hear about it. I mean, if it's like a $20,000 amp, I mean, obviously that's completely out of this price range. And thanks again for watching. I do appreciate it. I hope that you found this video somewhat helpful, and I hope everyone has a great day.